non-affordable. That's why George Whiteside's Harvard initiative is extraordinary, to bring it a 2-cent diagnostic using paper diagnostic.
I met this young fellow, 23-year-old, who got $1 million for TB. You know, I bumped into at a cocktail party some young Indian who received $1 million award. He's working on detecting TB through through breath test. So he's developing some electronic thingy you stick to your nose, and it tells you whether you have TB or not. Interesting idea. Never thought of it, you know.
Yeah, but you imagine that becomes too expensive, and we don't provide the global support, then it will not be again accessible. So therefore, affordable and accessible are linked to each other. And a forum like this, you know, is the one which should. So I think the annual event is a great idea, but it should be a continuous, connected annual event.
Annual event, linking everybody, doing portal, posting challenges, all of these things connect well. Welcome, Montec. No, you are perfect timing. Everybody's getting bored now. So, thanks. Thanks.
Okay.
It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce Dr. Montec Singh Ahluwalia. He is Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission of India, personal friend for almost 25 years, great thinker. We have office in the same building, we connect on and off, and it's always good to have Montec around. Now he's in the process of putting together 12th plan. So I requested Montec this morning when we were at the dais to talk a little bit about the planning process and how he sees innovation agenda fitting into it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here. I gather this is the last session of a somewhat exhausting 2 days, so probably everybody would be very grateful if I would just tell a few jokes and call it a day, to lighten the atmosphere. But let me, first of all, I feel very inadequate because this is not a subject that I actually understand, or it's not my principal responsibility. So really what I want to do is to share some of the system perceptions that somebody has when they're asked to write something, or rather, it's not me, but all my colleagues get together and write a plan. I mean, obviously innovation as a buzzword is in. I mean, everybody is declaring the decade of innovation, the century of innovation, or whatever you like, etc., knowledge economy, and so on. So one important role in these sorts of documents is simply the acknowledgement that something is important. And this may seem as if I'm denigrating it, but I'm actually not. Because in a governmental process, everything is a little hierarchical. So if things haven't been actually identified as a initial principle, it's very difficult to get something done later on. The value of identifying it as a principle is that when somebody wants to push something that is innovative, they can say, oh, by the way, you said that innovation is important, and this fulfills that requirement. And I think from that perspective, we are all on the same page. And of course, we've just produced a 12th five-year plan approach paper. The actual plan is being produced now. And that approach paper includes a whole chapter on innovation, simply to acknowledge that a plan is not just about agriculture, industry, human resource development, etc., the traditional silos. But the real question is, have we just created another silo called innovation? And it's very easy for the effort in this area to degenerate into yet another silo. only difference is this silo would be overlooking all the other silos. And you can immediately see that if that's what happened, it isn't going to work. So what I'm trying to do in the Commission is to maybe sensitize ourselves into a better understanding of what would actually make innovation happen. Please have no doubt in your mind that we do regard the innovation as very important. Actually, for an economist, there's absolutely no hesitation in regarding innovation as important, except they always use different terminologies to say the same thing. I mean, sometimes they talk about technical progress, sometimes they talk about X-efficiency, sometimes they talk about just getting to the production frontier, and all of those things are simply a reflection of doing more with less, and they're part of what economists would call Pareto optimality and what business consultants call win-win situations or whatever. So the real thing is, from an operational point of view, what do we do? Well, I think that one thing that is important is that, you know, it's very easy, nothing is very easy, but relatively easy to identify ex post examples of useful innovation. And I'm sure that, I mean, everybody has his favorite example for each country. Certainly in India, I'm sure Sam has already given you. You heard him describe some of those things in the morning. And I'm sure there are others, and no doubt the documentation brings it forward. So it's easy to tell when something is an innovation, and there's a kind of a social consensus that that's a very good thing. And, you know, obviously, for a poor country like India, it has to be something that responds very effectively to the needs of the majority of the population. So that bias, although quite honestly, there's nothing wrong with India doing innovation that isn't aimed only at the bottom of the population, but by definition, that's such a large number that that's something we should be giving priority to. But you know, what I feel is that while it is relatively easy to point to instances of great innovation, from a planning point of view, what is important is what in the ecosystem made it possible. Because otherwise we'll just have innumerable people pushing innumerable ideas saying, oh, this is very innovative, and this will promote innovation, and you only find out 10 years later that it actually didn't promote any innovation at all. So how do you move from an ex-ante identification of what actually is deemed to have worked, an ex-post identification of what is deemed to have worked, to an ex-ante identification that what is it about the ecosystem or the set of policies or whatever that actually made it work. And here, it seems to me that, I mean, there's obviously a lot in the area of technology development and research and what have you, doing it differently, that would increase the likelihood of generating innovative ideas and innovative interventions is very important. Clearly, the whole business of making capital available to people who want to innovate is extremely important, and particularly in a country like ours, which is otherwise rather heavily dominated by public sector allocators of capital, like the banks and so on. I mean, we've done our bit by setting up a little group which is going to look at issues of angel investing and what have you. And Saurabh here is helping out on that. He's a member of the group. So that's somewhat obvious kind of thing from the economic point of view. There's a lot of areas like microfinance, which, you know, were sort of interesting. I mean, until 2 years ago, they were being described as hugely innovative. And all of a sudden, the atmosphere around microfinance seems to have changed completely. So really the question of a judgment, when is something actually innovative, when is actually not innovative, is a difficult one to work out. So I think when we think of the 12th plan, I feel that that's what we really need the most information on. Now, quite obviously, one can look at what is successful elsewhere and then try to infer what is it about the system that made that possible, and by extension, what is it about the system in India that would make similar things work well? And that's something that we really ought to do much more on. You know, the other thing in our context is that process innovation, since so much of the development initiatives are actually intermediated through the government, through one form or another of central government programs and state government programs, etc. What is it about the processes through which these things work that would enable more innovation to take place? And I mean, it's a constant complaint, and we highlight that in the approach paper to the 12th plan, that, you know, most people seem to think that the issues we are addressing are the right issues. You know, it's possible, it's conceivable that people criticize the planning process. The planning process is just the collectivity of government. I mean, we are not, I should emphasize, we are not economic czars who sort of lay out the blueprint and then everybody else rushes off to implement it. We're just one cog in a huge wheel, a machine, and we're very intimately involved in the process by which ideas gel and become government policy. But we're working all the time with other ministries, etc. So I think it could truly be said that no government policy becomes a policy, certainly without the ministry concerned having owned it and played a dominant role. It's also true that it doesn't become a policy without the Planning Commission having had its say. I mean, it could get overruled, but it always has its say. So we are, in that sense, I think we have to own whatever happens. But I think there's an overwhelming feeling that people, they don't say that, you know, you're chasing the wrong goals. These are not the important issues. I mean, for example, if we were primarily concerned with spending all our money developing maglev trains to connect every major airport with every major city, I can imagine a lot of people saying, that's not what India should be doing. You should be doing whatever health, education, and so on. And quite honestly, the present position is that most people think that we are talking about the right areas. Some of them think we aren't funding them as much as we should, although I would say that in the last 6 or 7 years, most people would agree that at least as far as the central government is concerned, there's a substantial shift of funding towards these relevant areas, relevant, that is, for the government, in an environment where the private sector is supposed to do a lot of things on its own. But having said that, people sort of recognize, yes, you've chosen the right subjects, yes, you're spending a lot of money, but you're getting lousy results. So, I mean, you know, so obviously, I mean, one approach is simply that the design is wonderful, it's just not being implemented, and so you put layers of policemen to make sure that everybody does whatever the thing was meant to do. But actually, the other is, quite frankly, that in these top-down systems, the programs are simply not designed in a manner that allow for a lot of initiative at the local level. And the sort of combined with the belief that if you were to give that flexibility for local initiative, I mean, what would happen is that in areas where local capacity is poor, the thing would really perform lousily. But on the other hand, in areas where the local capacity is good, things might really perform wonderfully. And the wonderful wouldn't be the same pattern across the country. And you'd really find that somebody's doing it one way and that's wonderful, and somebody else is doing it another way and that's wonderful. And quite frankly, I don't find that we are equipped analytically and rigorously to try to infer the planning implications of this. But certainly it seems to me that if you want to promote innovation, and if I think Sam said it's the people who innovate, it's not the government, then really you just need to simply look at every scheme and say, how about increasing the flexibility by a factor of 2 or a factor of 3? Personally, I think that would be a very good thing. And in the 12th plan, we're going to try and do that. There are constitutional restrictions and restraints, but you know, that is something I think we really need to do so that basically you're freeing up the system. Of course, that's relatively easy to do when the innovation is something where the implementation is actually at the ground level. It's a little more difficult to do when the implementation is not at the ground level, but at a middle or even a higher level of government. because then what kind of flexibility is needed is sort of less easily defined. So I think this is one set of issues that we are really trying to grapple with. So I think looking at, stepping back a little bit, I mean, clearly there's the pure technology development side of innovation, I mean, we want to sort of, to my mind, that probably requires a very major rethinking of how technology development funding takes place in the country. Our scientific people or our scientific bureaucracy and the associated groups are kind of looking at that. Then there's the pure government processes and how do we bring in something innovative there, which I hope that we will be able to do something about. And then, of course, there is things like putting into the financial system enough flexibility, seed money like the innovation fund that was announced in the morning, that would basically allow lots of people with ideas to actually take off and push them forward. So I think we are very much behind, we are very much on the same page in those kinds of areas. But I'd be very grateful if in the few minutes that we have, if somebody wishes to point me in a direction which I'm missing, in the sense that really coming out of your own discussions in the morning, I mean, what are the things that we ought to be doing in the 12th plan? Of course, one of us is a member, two of us actually are members of SAM's council, so Dr. Kasturi Rangan and Arun Myra, they were there in the morning but not here now. So we have a mechanism for internalizing what happens in the Innovation Council. But it'd be very, very useful for me if some of our external guests, based on what I've said, wanted to point me in the right direction, and then we can take it up with Sam. But let me, with those words, Sam, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I can't say welcome you all, because I should be saying I'm glad to have the opportunity to say farewell, since this is the last. But I do hope, I'm grateful that you were able to accept Sam's invitation, and we do look forward to learning quite a bit from the outcome of the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Montek. Thank you very much. Any input for Montek, Anish? What about this crowdsourcing and grant challenges and all that?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that it's not exactly clear how it fits the 12th plan process, but I will say a key to our innovation strategy in the U.S., and I think a discussion that we've been having here, is equal parts top-down and bottom-up. So the top-down is the president lays out a bold ambition. Can we double the income of a high school dropout in less than 5 months of skills training, or something to that effect? And so you have a series of these grand challenges that then people form teams around to go after, and they're a good organizing principle. And then the bottom-up is not knowing exactly what will come out of it. We have these inputs, data sets that are open to the public, research summaries, other things. Can we publish them in a manner that can be reused by entrepreneurs and innovators in pursuit of, in some cases, commercial endeavors, in other cases, endeavors that will achieve public ambition? And I think, we see both fitting as a matter of you made a comment about process innovation, setting these grand challenges and then facilitating breakthroughs through bottom-up data sharing and openness. At least that's what our experience has in the U.S. I don't know if it's relevant in your context.
Leonardo Rios, Mexico. First, congratulations. I said, Sam, in the morning, I would like to have the same meeting that you got here with the President of Mexico and the top minister saying innovation is really important for the country. Then maybe one day, then congratulations. Congratulations also because you have a leader that understands innovation. That is very important. Your country also is. And well, Mexico also, we don't have a lot of resources. We are starting also the innovation process. And we would like to share with you the differences, the failures, the success, and how to measure, because it's very difficult to determine how much impact you are getting with the results, with the program. So maybe we can share some different tools, how you are determining if your program with universities and enterprises is working or not working, how much patents, how much new jobs, whatever. But we would like to have this benchmarking with you if you don't.
I just want to, I think I like what you said, that you set up these goals. One consequence of having a planning tradition in this country is there's no dearth of goals.
Right.
I mean, we have 27 monitorable indicators that would actually, if they were achieved, it would be totally clear to everybody that we have succeeded. We have targets for the infant mortality rate, we have targets for child malnutrition rate, we have targets for everything.
And we have had these targets for a long time.
Yeah, but the real, I think, what I don't get, and the problem is, what I don't get is a sense of somebody getting up and saying that, look, this was the target, we're not getting there. We've taken a look at what we're doing, and you know what? We're doing it totally wrong, and therefore we want to do it totally differently, and this time we'll get there. Generally what we get is, yes, this was the target, we're not getting there, and you know what? It's because you didn't give us enough money. And by the way, on the matter of restructuring, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a little bit of restructuring and this is it. But essentially, we need twice as much money as you're giving. And go through one after the other. It's that is happening. So quite frankly, and the problem is, one of the difficulties is that if the restructuring is going to be done by the same guys who have not been meeting the targets, it is not really likely that you will get very much restructuring. But in the way the system works, and this is something we've frequently said, that in the old days, the government was the sum total and repository of 90% of the knowledge. I think it's probably true that 30 years ago, 90% or 80% of the knowledge on anything more or less rested within the government, within the public sector, within the public universities, and 20% outside. Now, with a different kind of economy opened up and all the rest of it, this process is reversed. 80% of the knowledge on almost anything actually resides outside the government. We do not have good ways of laterally inducting this knowledge at all, because silos are impenetrable to anything that causes very fundamental change. And that's why I emphasize process, because actually in government, for example, Progresa in Mexico and the Bolsa Familia in Brazil, go anywhere around the world, and if you ask people, what is a new idea on child nutrition, and they will say, these two programs. It is virtually impossible to get this accepted in India. The most we've done, it's not a small achievement, we've begun to experiment with the idea. And there's no support for it whatsoever from the civil society groups, by the way. So this is a very good example of very specific innovation. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. It's not true that we're not making any progress. Now, some of the chief ministers say that's what we want. Some civil society organizations are beginning to experiment with it. But it becomes a little disturbing if it's going to take years for these ideas to actually get put in. Maybe we have to live with it. That's why my view is that if we were to just give room to experiment, then some state chief minister would be able to experiment in one of the X number of districts differently. And I think linked to that, quite honestly, if you're thinking about government programs, linked to that is the importance of independent evaluation of programs. We are just about in the Planning Commission now, we are recruiting for a person to head a new office which will be suitably independent and suitably high level. We've had evaluation programs, but they're headed at a much more junior level, and they're more or less internal to the system. Whereas logically, to have a really good evaluation, I mean, the evaluation should be sufficiently independent of the Planning Commission, because after all, as I said earlier, whatever happens, every program is, in the end, signed off by the Planning Commission. So if you're going to have an evaluation of this program, it can't be done by someone relatively junior within the Commission. So these are some of the issues that, to my mind, are quite important. Yep.
You said that you didn't think it was a good idea to make innovation yet another silo, particularly not one that then dominates the other silos, because then.
Well, if it could, I'd be happy.
But could you make it not a silo, but sort of the turbocharger of the plan?
Sorry, the what?
The turbocharger of the plan.
No, let's put it this way. Somehow we must inject the concept of innovation into what everybody does. But you know, I think in the program document there is a letter from the cabinet secretary which sort of tell every ministry, please tell me what you've done that's innovative. But you know, actually I have my doubts. What will happen is every ministry will respond saying they've done something that's innovative. But you know, is that really going to be innovative? It's not very clear. So I don't know how, the short answer is, I don't know how to do it, but I believe we need to do it. My suspicion, by the way, is that a lot of it, I think if we gave enough signals, and those signals are endorsed from a high enough level and they are built into the planning process and what have you, then in some of the silos that we complain about, some innovation will take place. But to my mind, one of the most important things is the interaction between the government silos and the rest of society. Although even there, as I was mentioning in the case of Progressa, the kind of rest of society that interacts with some of the government silos doesn't always support innovation. Universities are an extremely good example where there is very little serious support of innovation in higher education the moment you get specific. Everybody, if you say, and Sam is the original proponent of this idea, that we want to transform ourselves into a knowledge society. Absolutely right. 99% vote yes. That we must have universities that are world class. Everybody agrees yes. But therefore, we must change the way that we recruit people, and we may have to change the way salaries are paid. Absolutely no. That we may well have to charge students fees and maybe combine that with scholarships and loans. Absolutely no. So, I mean, you know, I think somehow it is easy to get a positive feedback as long as the feedback is not specific enough. It's only when you make it specific that people say, hang on a minute, that's not what I meant. But I think I don't want to come across sounding negative on this. I mean, I think unless we address this head on, it won't happen. The real issue then is, what is it that government can do which simply strategically will force innovation? I had suggested something in the science departments, which I don't think met with the support of any of the science departments. And we have somebody there?
Ramaswamy was here.
All gone. Okay, so I can now... I said, why are we funding different science silos? Why don't we just pool all the funds into a challenge research fund and let them compete for it? Now, it's a pretty no-brainer kind of idea. It's hardly innovative. But this is not at all. The science chaps are dominantly concerned with the fact that they don't have flexibility because they're subjected to government rules, and they say, quite rightly, that, you know, you can't do science if you're subjected to the general financial rules of government. But they're not actually prepared to say, well, all right, let's, I mean, I don't mean pool all the funds, but you could have a system where government laboratories are on a shoestring maintenance budget, But really, if they get to do, whether they get to do research or not, depends on a competitive posing of a research proposal that would be vetted by a peer group, which need not even be all Indian, it could be outside. That's immediately you run into huge, so frankly, I think where government processes are concerned, if nobody is resisting it, it really isn't innovative at all. I mean, that's another good test. I think we should we should let loose a lot of ideas and spot the ones that are hugely resisted, because those are the ones that will have a payoff.
That's all wonderful, but I'm thinking, is part of the reason why you pulled this roundtable together, was it intended that it might be a catalyst, or it might be a focus, or it might help you? Because it sounds as though you've got a fairly good idea about what should be done, you'd like to do, but you find difficult and it's resisted, and the more you try, the more resistance there is, so that conceivably a group of well-minded, possibly celebrated experts from around the world, thoughtful people with good constructed ideas backed by experience, if this group pulled together some high principles, that would help you in your ongoing, never-ending battles here to try and do something successful. I mean, if that, I mean, I can understand that that might well be, but if that's what you're looking for, the group itself needs to, I think it's, a number of people have suggested this, we need to have some mechanism whereby, you know, key issues are teased out and agreed conclusions are reached. So it has the imprimatur, I guess, of the group. And then conceivably you end up with something of a blueprint or some agreed principles which are then based on successful innovation, successful government involvement, successful private sector involvement around the world, which could equip you to do more. And if it's done cleverly, it could well equip all of us to take back, because I'm sure that even though we're all running the best innovation strategy and our policies are the best ever, there are a lot of things that each individual, each country could do better, and it could well end up as being quite a helpful catalyst blueprint for everyone. But if that's what we're going to do, we need to structure the group in a way that we arrive at that sort of agreed set of processes.
Yeah, Monte, this is Carl Dahlman. I think that your approach is just completely right, and I want to suggest one thing. Something that India has a tremendous potential in is in education, and we've discussed that. And just to give you an example, something that was done, again, in Mexico that I happen to know of. In Mexico, there's a very good private institution called the Tec de Monterrey, it's the MIT of Mexico. And one thing which they did, they wanted to take engineering education to lower income classes, and they tried distance education, that didn't work. And so they thought of a new system, and there was tremendous resistance within the academic community of the university, which was the following. They wanted to develop something which the private sector wanted, the kind of engineers that they wanted. They asked the faculty to put this together. They were going to do it in a new way at a very low cost. The faculty rebelled because that was going to go against their entitlements. And so they had to design a new institution called Tech Millennium, which was done outside the regular tech, and the rector then got the faculty, paid them an extra, those who volunteered to do a course that was going to be done online, and then they would hire professors who would be given a base salary and paid a premium depending on how many actually graduated. And this system, they were able to do it for how many were graduating, how many passed the test. And they developed a system for 1/3 of the price of the normal Tec de Monterrey, and the quality standard is as good as those there. This required an institutional innovation because of the resistance, the same kind of resistance. So finding models like this where you have to go outside the system, you might have to create a new institutional innovation to be able to get that. And I think that here in India, you have the raw material, you have fantastic brains, fantastic professors, and you have a tremendous lack of enough of the skilled training. So to do that, that requires some support from the center, from you, with the Ministry of Education, to allow this kind of experimentation. You can put together a coalition of different universities to do that, and that begins to really leverage the potential that you have in terms of the fantastic human capital, and at the same time, the tremendous needs that you have. So again, using this idea to think to how you can sort of change against the vested interest that sometimes restrict this from happening requires this institutional innovation. To do that, you have to have support from somewhere in the superstructure.
We did something like this in 80s in telecom, IT. What we call this is bypass. We did a lot of bypass to the system. You know, you have this Department of Telecom, create a little organization outside of telecom, for telecom, becomes too big, and then it gobbles the main organization. Well, with this, thanks again, Montec. We'll take 2-3 minutes to close. First of all, I really want to thank all our visitors, guests, for taking time out from their very busy schedule to come be with us for 2 full days. I know many of you have traveled from quite a distance, so thank you for being here. Anish, don't run away. Okay. Sit. Can't go? Okay. I also want to thank all our speakers. They really were great in terms of keeping to the schedule. All our programs worked well. Discussions were very lively. I want to also thank all our chairpersons. They were not given much of warning, much of background. They were just thrown in, saying, you chair this session. And then they sort of navigated through. I also want to take time out to thank World Bank Institute for their support. You just get up and, yeah. And they've been working with us for a while. Thank you for being with us. Then I want to recognize our young team. I call them a bunch of kids, but they are great. Believe me, they just do such a great job with very little instruction, lots of enthusiasm, lots of energy, and they are fun to work with. I'm going to ask them to stand up as I speak their names. Sukhman, Dipti, Bindeshwari, Ashima, Vikash, Rahul, Kirti, and then not so young, Samir, Kalpana, Gopal, and finally our event managers and partners. Where are they? They're out making tea or something. Thanks everybody, and good to be with you, and we hope to continue this. We'll meet next year again. We'll have a bigger hall, better facility, and better program, I guarantee. Thank you.